Hi everyone, in this video we're going to talk about interview questions and answers. And we're going to give a few examples of questions that you can get in most interviews. In other words, the questions that are asked almost always. And some sample answers so you can actually get an idea for what you can do to actually ace that interview and get that job. But before we start, remember to smash that like button below because it helps with the algorithm, all right? Perfect. All right, so let's begin. The first thing that you need to take into account is that in an interview, there are three major kinds of questions that are going to be asked of you. These are general questions, such as walk me through your resume, or tell me about yourself, or why are you looking to leave your current job, or what sets you apart from other candidates, among many others. Those are general questions that you absolutely must have a good answer for because they will be asked 99.9% of the time. Now, the second type of interview questions that you will get are what we call technical questions. This means that if you are going into a subject area or a role that requires a lot of specialized knowledge, maybe you are doing software development as a software engineer, maybe you're coding, maybe you are going to work in finance at a bank, or you're doing something else along those lines, and they need to know that they are hiring someone who has those skills, regardless of what your resume says. So they may try to figure out how far are you when it comes to your ability to do what you say you can do and what they need in your role, right? Now, the third and last kind of like big bucket of interview questions that you can get is behavioral questions. What behavioral questions are, they are simply questions that ask you to tell them about a time in which you had a situation and how you dealt with it in a work setting. For example, they could ask something along the lines of, tell me about a time you had a conflict at work and what happened, right? Something along those lines. The question behind this really is, are we hiring someone who maybe has the technical skills to actually do the job, but someone who is not going to be able to be a good teammate, or someone that we will not want to have around us day to day? Because at the end of the day, being at work is one of the things that takes most of your time in the day, and you don't want to spend it with someone who just makes your life harder, or is not agreeable, or is not nice to be around with, right? Think about it from your own shoes. If you were the interviewer, would you like to hire two people with technical skills, the one who is actually agreeable and has shown that in the past they have behaved in a way that's responsible and that is actually constructive for the company and for yourself, versus someone who doesn't really have that experience or has not been able to articulate, at least to you in an interview, how they've been able to sort through those normal work occurrences in their life, right? So if that's from the interviewer's perspective, now you need to know that you need to absolutely prepare for all of these big types of questions. Just to remember, before we begin, we have general type questions, technical questions that are about your knowledge and skill sets, very specific, and we have behavioral questions. So on general questions, some of the most asked ones are things such as, tell me about yourself. So when you say, tell me about your resume, the very short answer is to focus, and you should have prepped this beforehand, and tell them a short story about that highlights your academic, whatever your studies or certifications or even self-taught experience, depending on what role you're going for, you have completed, what work experience you have thus far, and how that relates to the role you're going into now, while at the same time telling them why you're making this transition. So essentially, let's say that you're going into an interview, and let's say it's a banking interview. Maybe you just graduated from college. Then they might ask you, tell me about yourself. Well, you might start somewhere along the lines of, yes, so essentially I went to the university in my country. Again, you will say the actual university. I went to this university in my country, and initially, to be honest, I didn't really know what I was going to study. But after taking several elective classes, I realized that really, I like crunching numbers. I like the finance aspect of companies, and I decided to take a few more classes on the subject. Before long, I really developed an interest when it came to banking, but more specifically to the ability of banks to create money in the economy and to be able to create more jobs for people while allowing companies to grow with the use of financing. This was something that was really interested to me, and as I delved deeper, I decided to take an internship with a local bank in the community, and I realized through my through my internship that this was really something that I wanted to do based off on not only what I was doing, but also all of the responsibility and functions that I saw my elders and my seniors performing. And I thought, you know what, I think this is really for me. So I made a list of the top companies, the top banks here in our region, and I decided that your company was definitely at the top of my list. And that actually takes me to why I'm here today. I believe that this role of financial analyst as an entry-level position at this company is a great fit for me based on my capabilities and skill sets to date. Something along those lines, right? I was making it up as I went. You want to practice it more and then finish it with the that's why I'm here today. So that they kind of like, they're cue in to like, oh, okay, next question. Another general question that you might get very easily could be something more along the lines of what sets you apart. What you want to do in that question is, it could be anything like that, or why should we hire you, or why are you leaving the previous job. They have little nuances, but at the end of the day, whenever you are being asked a question in an interview and the question is of the general nature, what you want to do is keep it short. You want to keep it positively, keep it positive, word it positively, right? And you also want to make sure that you're highlighting how you fit their role and why you fit it so well, and also why you're kind of like the type of candidate who's also well-rounded in terms of you can do the job, but you can also mesh very well with the team, right? That's something that we mentioned earlier. So in a question like that, what sets you apart, or why should we hire you? You should go along the lines of, so I'm pretty certain that you must be getting a lot of applications for this role, given that your company is such and such. Having said that, it is my understanding that for this role specifically, you're looking for people who have a lot of experience, not only on banking in the private sector when it comes to agriculture, but also people who have been able to work at the industrial sector. Having said that, while I don't have an extensive history in the industrial sector, I did do an internship at this company in the industrial sector where I learned this, and that about the industry. And it's intriguing to me that using some of that information, it really fits what's going on in your current market when it comes to a lot of industrial companies acquiring some of the agricultural tools and smaller companies and farms in the regional areas. And I think that is a growth opportunity for the banking sector now, when we are able to actually finance those deals that are occurring. And that's why I'm actually very interested in this role, because I feel like some of my connections and the experience that I've had so far is actually of very strong use, and I'll be able to contribute greatly to this position and your organization. Something along those lines. Again, I'm kind of like, I'm making it up as I go, but you get the idea, right? That's sort of like the way you want to word things and kind of like push it. Just saying like, hey, I have this and that you say you need, and also keeping into account the things that they didn't say in the job description that they may want, right? So that's how you want to go about it. Again, similar with the very likely questions such as what are your greatest achievements or strengths, and also what are your weaknesses. You want to go in with things that you know they're looking for. If you are really good at like typewriting yourself, or like just handwriting, right? Maybe that's not something that they need, so that's not the strength you want to highlight. You will go with something along the lines of, instead of just saying, oh, I am very diligent. No, put an example. Always in these questions, try to bring up concrete examples from the past that actually show and demonstrate rather than just tell how and why they should pick you. All right. Similar with weakness. Try to pick a weakness that it's okay, but it's not going to be incredibly important for the job, right? If they need you to sit down and read a ton of documents as a lawyer so that you can actually come up and redact another contract yourself, and you tell them, oh, I get bored easily, I can't just like stay in a room and read all day, then that's not going to be a good fit for that role, right? That's not the weakness you want to highlight. And if that's actually true, I will question you as to why you're trying to go for a job that you know you're not going to do well in. So regardless, let's jump now into technical questions. Now, this is obviously the part that I can least help you in subjectively, unless I know your specific case, right? But having said that, the general guidelines are, again, you want to keep it concise, you want to keep it short. If you don't really know something, go ahead and you can say it, right? Like, it's not like, you shouldn't be afraid or defensive. That's going to come across very negatively if you do that. Instead, you should go in and say, that's an interesting question. To be honest with you, I know that I can program in Java, C++, and XYZ. Having said that, Python is a somewhat newer language to me. And while I know how to do some of the basic editing or scripting processes such as XYZ, I am still not at the level in which I can do A, B, C, which is what you're asking. Now, having said that, I am pretty confident in my abilities to learn whatever is required in a short period of time so that I am able to produce the projects A, B, and C if that's what you require currently. Something along those lines, right? That's what you wanna go in a technical question when you don't really 100% grasp what it is that they're saying. Obviously, if you say I am a pro at coding in Python in your resume or your application, and then it comes off in the technical part of the interview that that's not the case, that's not gonna look good because you were not honest. You should try to embellish yourself to make you look well, to make you look good, so you are marketable and you can sell yourself effectively, but do not lie. Like, there is a clear line in most cases where you're just blatantly lying, so don't do that ever in your applications, okay? So in the technical question, let's suppose it's a banking one again, and they ask you, okay, so we have a new project in line for the bank. How would you actually value financing a company in this sector? Like, is that a project that we should finance? Yes or no? What would you consider? How would you go about valuing that company? Well, let's say that you're a finance major and you go along the lines of, okay, so the first thing I will do is see what information we have on the company's financial structure. Depending on the capital structure of the company, I will either use a method such as the weighted average cost of capital or the APV method in order to value the cash flows of that company and be able to come up with a present value estimate for the company's value currently. I will also try to use a method of comparative analysis and see what are some of the metrics of that company in its industry and whether or not it is above the average. Having said that, that will actually give me a good idea for how I can actually value it in its peers in the industry, as well as in similar transactions that may have happened in the past. And that will actually guide me in my recommendation or analysis into whether or not we should actually finance that deal. Okay, something like that. Just succinct, to the point, technical, because it's a technical question, so give details where they are due, and you should do just fine. But again, when you don't know something 100%, and this happens all the time, interviewers sometimes, they push you to the limit. They ask you some basic things, then intermediate, then advanced, just to see where exactly do you fall, right? So if they're asking you something you don't know about, just go ahead and say, well, I know that I could do this, this, and that. I'm not 100% sure that I could actually get there, but I am pretty confident that I can actually get there in a short period of time doing some due diligence, right? Something like that. So having said that, let's move on to behavioral questions. Now, tell me about a time you actually failed at work. Oh, well, to be honest, we had a project that we needed to perform in a very strict deadline, and actually we had an issue in our team where two of our teammates actually fell ill, and the workload was just too much to handle since we were also handling multiple other projects along the way. So at this point, what happened was that I failed to adjust for this event, for this surprise quickly enough. And we actually ended up cutting it incredibly close to the deadline when we developed the project. And it turned out that the project had a few things that we had to work along after the fact. It wasn't a big issue because the project was actually very well performed, but it was a very big learning opportunity for me since me and the rest of the team was so hard pressed, and we actually had to put in more work afterwards. That I learned that lesson from it, and that lesson is that whenever something like that happens next, I want to be able to talk to my superiors and see if we can source other talent from the company, and see if someone who maybe is at another division or someone who has similar skill set, who maybe doesn't have such a big workload, could maybe come in and chip in some work and help us accomplish this in a more timely fashion. What you want to do with the failures and things like that is just denote the situation, denote what you did in order to fix the situation, and denote what you learned from the situation. If it's a failure, it is a failure, but again, don't make it something that's so critical for the role that you're going to go in. For example, don't go in and say a failure like, oh, we didn't manage to develop the expectations and it was a mess, the company lost millions of dollars. That's not what you want to highlight. Even if something like that happened, there's no need to highlight that. Just pick something that's different that you learn a lot from, unless it's something that's like you're a public figure or something like that. You're probably not watching this right now, but even if you are, if it's something very relevant that they know and they ask you about that specifically and it's a failure, just be honest, go ahead, say it, say what you learned from it and how, then give a concrete example of something that you did afterwards in which it really worked because of what you learned from that failure. Does that make sense? Because at the end of the day, we all fail in smaller or bigger ways. It doesn't matter. What matters is how we take ownership of that and how we improve in the future, all right? So that's one of the behavioral questions. There are many different behavioral questions. If you want to have more ideas for them, you can go into the specific video that covers behavioral questions. But again, that's the idea. You want to set up the situation. You want to talk about what actions you took and what results you obtain, okay? Now, this was very hard pressed when I gave you the sample, but really you want to prepare it very well and make sure that you make a situation, an example, where the stakes are pretty high and when the results were very successful because of your actions, so that you come across as not necessarily the hero, but like a very competent person who knows what they're doing and who's able to actually contribute to a company very strongly, okay? That's what you want to do in most of those cases. When they say, oh, tell me about a time in which a teammate couldn't perform, tell me about a time in which you had a conflict, you want to go about it like, oh, yeah, the situation was a conflict, but it was more than that. Because of the conflict, we may not have been able to do the project that was so important for the company because there were millions of dollars or whatever behind that project. So it was critical for us to be able to sort our differences and be able to contribute and be able to actually make that project a success. Therefore, you go into the actions you took to resolve that conflict, and finally, what were the results of you taking that action? Oh, the company marketing campaign was a success. We generated over an increase of 30% in sales month to month, or something like that, right? So I hope you find this helpful. If you haven't yet, remember to smash that like button. Comment below and let me know what other interview questions and answers would you be interested in hearing. And as always, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know whenever a new video comes out.